Hello everyone, and welcome to the Python Setup lecture. It's time to get Python onto your computer. Whether you're using a Windows, Mac OS, or Linux computer, the installation process is actually pretty straightforward. But make sure you give yourself 20 to 30 minutes for this particular step to make sure you have enough time to download and finish the installation. Now let's go over just a few things before we get started. In this course, we're going to be using Python within a development environment, where we actually type out Python commands. And for learning, we're going to be using the Jupyter Notebook system, which we'll discuss later on. Also later on, we're going to have a whole lecture on other IDE options. And IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. So if you're an experienced programmer and maybe you're using another development environment or a text editor, for instance Sublime Text Editor, and you prefer that, we're going to be going over those options in a later lecture, and you can feel free to use them for this course. The easiest way to install Python in the Jupyter Notebook system that we use throughout this course is using the Anaconda distribution. And we're going to be visiting the Anaconda distribution site, explaining what it is, and using it to easily install Python onto your computer. All the sites that I'm going to be showing you in this lecture can be found as a resource link, so check out the curriculum for the links. Let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and open up your browser. I suggest using Google's Chrome browser and type in jupyter.org into your URL, or just Google search for Jupyter, JUPYTER.org. I'm going to jump to my browser now and meet you at this website. Alright, here I am at jupyter.org, which is the main page for Jupyter. And just to show you a quick glimpse of what Jupyter is, you can scroll down on this page where it says Ready to Get Started, and where it says Try it in your browser, click on that link and you can open it in a new tab, and it will take you to this page right here, https://try.jupyter.org. And this is what a Jupyter Notebook server looks like. We're going to be running Jupyter later on locally on your computer, but if you ever want to just quickly try it out over the internet, you can check out this website. And then you can come here where it says New, and on this website you have a variety of options, including other programming languages such as Ruby or R, and then you'll see some Python options. So you can click on one of these Python options. Here I'm clicking on Python 3, and it will load up a Jupyter Notebook. This is what a Jupyter Notebook looks like. Here it's untitled, but you can click on this to rename the notebook. So we can say my first notebook, hit enter, and in this little cell you can actually type in Python code. So for instance, if you're following along with me, your very first Python command can be print, and then we'll have an open parentheses. Note the auto completion there. And I'm going to just zoom in with Control or Command plus on this web page, and we can type in hello world inside quotes, and that makes it a string. And we'll be going over all these commands later on, but I just want to show you that within this cell I have some Python code, and I can click here on this little run button, and it will run the code, state a number showing that it's been run, and you can see the output directly below. And this is what we're going to be using to quickly iterate and learn about code. And there's actually notebooks assigned for every lecture. So later on in this lecture, I'm going to be showing you how you can access all the notebooks that go along with each lecture of this course. But just to show you another quick example, you can use this as 1 plus 2, hit Shift Enter, and then you will see that we have an output, 3. Alright, now let's show you how to actually get this sort of notebook system working on your computer. Come back here to jupyter.org. You can continue on to read about Jupyter, and it's currently used at a lot of companies such as Google, Microsoft, Bloomberg, IBM, etc. So a lot of big companies and a lot of big universities, Cal Poly Berkeley, and even national institutions such as NASA. But coming back up here, we have the Install the Notebook button. Click here on Install the Notebook, and it will take you to this page. Now the jupyter.org website is updated quite often, so don't worry if your page doesn't look exactly like I'm showing it here. It should look like something similar to this. But basically you have a prerequisite, and that is Python. So even though Jupyter runs a lot of programming languages, Python is going to be a requirement, either Python 3 or Python 2. And what they recommend is using this Anaconda distribution to install Python in Jupyter, and that's what we're going to be doing. So again, for new users, which is you and us, we're going to install Anaconda. So click here on this link, you can open in a new tab, and that's going to install Anaconda, and it's also going to install the Jupyter Notebook system all in one step. And it's actually going to download a bunch of other libraries for you that you may find yourself using in the future. So if we come here to that tab we just opened, it'll say download Anaconda now, and you'll notice that you have several links for yourself. You have the Windows, the Mac OS link, and Linux. So click on whatever operating system you're using. So I'm going to come down here to Windows, and you notice it's basically just tabs here, OS X and Linux. If you're on a Windows computer, make sure you choose the correct version. So here we have a 64-bit and 32-bit version for Python 3.5, and then we have a 64-bit and 32-bit version for Python 2.7. If you're running a newer computer, as long as it's not a very old computer, it's probably a 64-bit computer for Windows. If you're running an older version of Windows, maybe like Windows XP or Windows 7, double check to make sure you have a 64-bit computer. If you have an older version of Windows, such as like the ones I just mentioned, you may have a 32-bit computer, and you can actually check on your control panel. If you have a 32-bit computer, that's totally fine too. Just click here on the 32-bit installer. So if you're using Windows, just click on whatever installer you need. If you're using Mac OS X, you just come here and click on one of these graphical installers. Don't click on this command line installer, that's a little more complicated. Click on one of these graphical installers instead. And then if you're on Linux, you can just click on one of these installers and then just follow the directions here. Basically, if you're on Linux, you download the installer. You don't have to do step 2, but once you downloaded the installer, in your terminal window, you just type in this bash anaconda for 3.5 and bash anaconda for 2.7. So install this for Linux. For Mac OS X, basically you just download the graphical installer and then double click the downloaded.pkj file and follow the instructions there. For Windows, what we're going to be doing is clicking on one of these installers and then double clicking that .exe or executable file. Alright, so as far as the version we're going to be using in this course, like I mentioned previously, we actually teach both versions of Python, Python 2.7 and Python 3.5. They're very similar with just a few key differences, and in order to show those key differences, it's easier to show them by using Python 2.7 and then showing you what's changed in Python 3.5, because later on you'll see we can actually import functionality from Python 3 into Python 2.7. So if you want to follow along with the course exactly, then I would suggest you install Python 2.7. However, if you just want to go along with Python 3, since we do cover both versions of the course, you can go ahead and just click on this Python 3.5 version. It's really up to you. If you're super new to programming, then I would suggest following along exactly with the course and using 2.7. If you've done maybe just a few lines of Python code or programming in another language, then 3.5 should be fine as well. Like I said, we cover both versions in this course, so it's really up to you which one of these you want to download. To follow along exactly with the course and the easier way to show 2.7 and 3.5 differences, I would suggest then for newer users just installing Python 2.7. So I will click now on this 64-bit installer and it will download it for me. You'll get a prompt here, thank you for downloading. You actually don't need to put in your email, so just say no thanks. Alright, now that that has finished downloading, we can double click on it. Again, for Windows, it's a .exe file. If you're on Mac, it's going to be a .pkg file. Either way, you're going to just double click on this and then open it up. And here we have the setup, and you basically just follow the instructions here. So we can click Next, accept the license agreement, say just me or all users. Depending on whether or not you have the admin password, you may not be able to do all users. I'll just say just me for now. And then the destination folder, just leave that as the default. This is where it's going to actually install Anaconda in Python. So we'll see C, users, whatever your username is, and then Anaconda 2. Then click Next. Now on this screen we have the advanced installation options, and there's basically two options here. One is to add Anaconda to my path environment variable. Make sure that this is checked, and that way we can call Jupyter Notebook from the command line later on. And then the next one is to register Anaconda as my default Python 2.7 or Python 3.5, depending on which version you downloaded. I would also recommend that you select this, But if you already have multiple versions of Python on your computer, maybe you've done another course and have already downloaded Python, you will get a pop-up. So for instance, if I click here, you'll get some sort of warning saying something like a version of Python is already present. We recommend that if you want Anaconda registered as your system Python, you unregister that one first. So this will happen if you already have a version of Python registered on your computer. So if you already have multiple versions, just leave that unchecked. And then we'll click install, and it will install Anaconda and Python for us. So I will skip forward in time until this is finished installing. Alright, so this is finished installing. I'll click on next and then just click finish here. You don't actually have to learn more about Anaconda Cloud. That's just a service that's offered if you want to have a cloud environment. So just click finish here. And then the next step is to actually start Jupyter Notebook. Now if you're on a Mac OS or Linux computer, you're going to open up your terminal. So just do a search for the word terminal, and that will open up your terminal. If you're on Windows, you'll use your command prompt. So on Windows computers, just come here and then search for command prompt, and you should see a couple of options. You'll probably see Anaconda command prompt. You'll probably see your built-in command prompt. If you're an advanced user, maybe you used something like PowerShell before, any of these options is fine. Just click on command prompt here, and you'll get something that pops up. It probably won't be as big and as large fonts as I have here, but I just have this so that way it's a little clearer what I'm typing for you, the viewer. Again, if you're on a Mac OS or Linux, you just open up your terminal. Then, inside your command prompt or terminal, type in Jupyter, that's Jupyter, space, notebook, and then hit enter. And what this is going to do is it's going to start a Jupyter Notebook server. If it's your first time running it, it may take a little while. Eventually, you will see something that looks like this, and the last two lines should say something like, the Jupyter Notebook is running at HTTP localhost 8888, and then you can use Control-C to stop this server and shut down all kernels. And kernels is basically what's going to be running the Python, and we'll show you that in a second. Now, your browser should automatically pop up at this address, http://localhost:8888/. If you do not get the browser pop up automatically, you can just type it in yourself. So you can come here, open up a new tab, and then type in localhost:888. Once you've typed in localhost:8888, you should see something that looks like this. And as a quick note, even though this is opened in the browser, this is not actually connected through the internet. The development environment is just hosted by your browser, but it doesn't require any sort of internet connection. Unlike the try.jupyter.org website, which we saw earlier, which is over the internet and actually doesn't save any of your work. In this case, we're running everything locally, and it will save our work when we run it. So to start a new notebook, just come over here where it says New, and you should see a couple of options. You'll probably see something like Python Conda root and Python default. You won't see all the options we saw earlier with Try Jupyter because those are other what are known as kernels, and you have to install those separately. You can click on either of these two options, Python Conda root or Python default, and then it will open up a new notebook for you. And as I mentioned before, you can click here to name your notebook. So I can say My Notes, hit enter, and you can then type in Python code, which we're going to be learning about in this course. But to make sure everything worked for you, just type in something like 1 + 2, and then do Shift Enter to run that cell, and you should see the output here. Later on, we'll discuss other things you can do with these cells, such as click on a cell, and over here, put it in Markdown, and then you can type in actual text, such as, hello, this is text, do Shift Enter to run it, and then you will just have text here. So this is just text, not actual code, and you can see that it doesn't have an in or out symbol here. Alright, so that's basically it as far as the installation. If you have any questions, you can refer back to the previous lecture where there's a written out guide of everything I just did here, or you can just post a question to the Q&A forums in this course. If you get stuck on anything, I would recommend that you check out the previous guide and the frequently asked questions lectures first. If you still can't find your answer there, then you may want to do a search in the Q&A forums if you're stuck on something. And if you still can't find your answer, please feel free to post to the Q&A forums where I'm happy to help out. Alright, so that's it for the installation. Let's move on and talk about other development environments. Thanks everyone, and I will see you at the next lecture.